Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets that erased the edges of the world and turned Riverside Station into a blur of white and shadow. Clara Hayes stood beneath the flickering overhang light, her thin coat soaked through, her fingers numb and stiff as if carved from ice. The holiday crowds had vanished hours ago, leaving behind only drifting snow and the hollow echo of train announcements that no longer mattered. Her breath came out in shallow bursts, each one a ghost dissolving into the dark. She pressed her palm over her pocket again, even though she already knew it was empty. Her wallet had been taken on the subway, a quick lift she had not even felt until the doors had closed and the train was pulling away. Her phone battery had died shortly after. She was stranded in the middle of the city on the coldest night of the year with no way home and no one left to call except Dylan. And Dylan was not answering. She cupped her shaking hands around the metal receiver of the station payphone. It was colder than the air. 17 calls, all of them unanswered, all of them sent straight to voicemail. She tried to speak, but her teeth chattered violently, clicking together like small stones. A sharp wind cut across the platform, slicing through her clothing with the precision of a blade. The icy air bit at her exposed skin until it felt as though the cold had grown its own teeth. For a moment she closed her eyes and pictured her grandmother Rose lying in the hospital bed that afternoon, frail but smiling as she urged Clara to go and enjoy Christmas Eve. "Go find something good in the world," she had said with gentle insistence. "You deserve at least that." Clara had promised she would. She had believed Dylan would be waiting. She had believed he still cared enough to show up. The station lights buzzed overhead. The bench beneath her was a slab of frozen metal that seeped into her bones. People hurried past earlier without pausing, without really seeing her. A woman had shielded her child and moved around Clara as though she were a danger instead of a girl trying not to collapse from exhaustion and cold. The city kept rushing forward while she remained stuck in this moment like a single snowflake trapped on the wrong side of a window. Her breathing grew uneven. A dull ache pulsed at the base of her neck and spread down her spine. She knew the signs. Rose had once worked as a nurse and often told her the dangers of exposure. Clara could feel herself drifting towards something heavy and dark, something that whispered to her bones to let go. Her vision blurred around the edges, turning the station into a watercolor of gray and white. She wondered if anyone would notice if she simply stopped trying. If she let the cold take her. If she allowed herself to vanish quietly into the night the way so many forgotten people did. A strange calmness washed over her at the thought. It would be so easy to give in. Then a pair of headlights cut through the storm, bright and sharp, slicing open the white curtain around her. A black sedan rolled to a stop at the curb. The engine idled in a low, steady hum. The door opened and a figure stepped out, tall, composed, snow gathering on the shoulders of his coat, as if even the storm paused long enough to acknowledge him. Clara's knees wavered. For a heartbeat, she thought the cold had conjured him, a final hallucination before everything went dark. But he was real, and he was walking toward her. The stranger moved with a controlled urgency, his polished shoes crunching through the fresh blanket of snow as he approached Clara. His coat, a dark wool that looked impossibly warm, billowed slightly with each step. Snowflakes clung to the strands of his midnight hair and caught in the edges of his lashes, but he didn't seem to notice. His attention was locked onto her, as though she were the only solid thing in the storm. Clara tried to sit up straighter, but her muscles refused to obey. Her legs trembled violently beneath her, and her hands had gone from numb to a frightening shade of blue. The stranger crouched in front of her, leveling his gaze with hers. His eyes were a striking steel gray, sharp but human, seeing through the darkness and the layers of fear she had wrapped around herself. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low, steady, laced with an alarm he didn't bother to hide. Clara tried to answer, but her jaw shook uncontrollably, the words fracturing before they reached her lips. She managed a broken whisper that barely resembled language. His brows drew together as he took in her soaked coat, the sheen of frost on her hair, the way she swayed like a candle about to go out. "How long have you been out here?" he asked again. Clara forced her lips apart, but no sound came. A gust of wind slammed against her side, stealing her breath. The stranger exhaled sharply, the decision already made in his mind. He shrugged out of his coat in a single motion and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth hit her like a physical force, so sudden and overwhelming that she gasped. The coat smelled faintly of cedar and something clean and expensive. "You're going into hypothermia," he said with clinical certainty. "We need to get you warm now." Her pulse thudded unevenly in her ears. Every instinct her grandmother had taught her warned her not to trust strangers, especially men, especially at night. But the cold had carved away her logic until all that remained was instinct. And instinct told her this man was different. He wasn't looking at her the way Dylan sometimes had, with impatience or annoyance. He was looking at her with urgency, with responsibility, with recognition. "I don't know you," Clara whispered, her voice thin and cracked. The man leaned closer, not invading her space but anchoring her to consciousness. "My name is Adrian Blackwell, and right now, you need help. We can talk names and safety once you're not freezing to death." His tone held no threat, only an unexpected gentleness wrapped in unmistakable authority. He extended his hand, steady and warm even in the cold. Clara stared at it, her breath turning to mist between them. Behind Adrian, the sedan waited like a harbor of warmth in the storm. Ahead of her stretched only darkness and snow and the hollow ache of abandonment. Her fingers twitched. Her vision dimmed briefly. The world tilted dangerously. Clara heard her grandmother's voice somewhere deep within her memory. "Sweetheart, if the world ever tries to swallow you whole, find the hand that reaches back." Clara lifted her shaking hand and placed it in his. Adrian's grip closed around hers with quiet certainty. He pulled her gently to her feet, steadying her when her knees buckled. "Come with me," he said, his voice soft but unyielding. "I'll keep you safe." And for the first time that night, Clara believed she might survive the storm. The warmth of the sedan enveloped Clara the moment Adrian guided her inside, shutting out the furious storm as though he had sealed a door between two worlds. Heat poured from the vents, coaxing stinging sensation back into her fingers and toes. It hurt. It felt like fire crawling beneath her skin, but it was life, and she clung to it. Adrian slid into the driver's seat and fastened her seatbelt with swift, efficient movements. He cast a quick glance at her, jaw tight, eyes flicking over her trembling form. "Stay with me," he murmured, as if he could sense how the darkness tugged at the edges of her vision. "Just a few minutes." The car accelerated smoothly, gliding through the city streets that were now ghostly and quiet beneath the falling snow. Street lamps stretched in golden blurs across the window. Clara's teeth chattered violently despite the rising heat, each tremor rattling her bones. Adrian kept checking the rearview mirror, his knuckles white around the steering wheel. "You're freezing from the core out. We need to warm you gradually. No sudden heat. Just breathe." His tone was calm, but an undercurrent of urgency betrayed him. Clara tried to speak, but her tongue felt thick, her throat raw. Adrian glanced at her again. "We're almost there." The city shifted around them until the car rolled beneath a gleaming awning in front of a towering glass high-rise. Clara blinked, disoriented. This place wasn't simply expensive. It radiated a kind of untouchable luxury she had only ever seen from a distance. Adrian stepped out and opened her door before she could register the movement. When she tried to stand, her legs buckled. Without hesitation, Adrian scooped her into his arms. She let out a startled sound that barely qualified as protest. "I can walk," she managed. "Not right now," Adrian replied, his voice gentle but firm. His hold was surprisingly careful, supportive without confining. The scent of his coat still clung to her, warm cedar and faint cologne. He carried her through the marble lobby, where a doorman stared in astonishment but asked nothing. The private elevator opened at Adrian's approach as though it recognized him. Inside, Clara felt the faint hum of ascent. Her pulse raced with a mixture of fear, exhaustion, and something she couldn't name. The doors opened into a penthouse that overlooked the entire city. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a skyline blurred by snowfall. The space was sleek, minimalist, breathtaking. But Adrian didn't stop. He carried her straight to a large bathroom lined with soft lighting and warm stone. He set her gently on a bench and turned on the shower, adjusting the temperature with clinical precision. "You need to get out of those wet clothes immediately," he said. "I'll bring you something dry. Can you manage the rest?" Clara nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. Adrian hesitated at the door, as if ensuring she wouldn't collapse the moment he left. "If you need help, call. I'll only be outside." When the door shut, Clara stared at the steam filling the room. Her fingers shook uncontrollably as she tried to push off her coat. They barely responded. Tears blurred her vision, frustration mixing with humiliation. A soft knock. "Clara, are you all right?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The door opened just enough for Adrian to peek inside, his gaze fixed firmly on her face. When he saw she was still fully clothed, unable to move, something in his expression softened. "Let me help." With careful hands, he peeled away her soaked coat, then her sweater, stopping respectfully when he reached her blouse. "Can you manage from here?" She nodded again, this time with more certainty. 5 minutes later, wrapped in a thick robe and with warmth slowly returning to her skin, Clara stepped out to find Adrian waiting with a mug of something steaming. He exhaled in relief when he saw her. "Better." Clara nodded, sinking onto the plush sofa. Adrian handed her the mug and sat across from her, giving her space yet radiating a presence impossible to ignore. "Want to tell me what happened tonight?" he asked quietly. Clara stared at the cup in her hands, warmth seeping into her fingers. She swallowed hard, and for the first time in hours, she felt safe enough to speak. Clara wrapped both hands around the mug Adrian had given her, letting the rising steam thaw the lingering numbness in her fingers. The hot chocolate smelled rich and comforting, a warmth she could feel even before tasting it. She took a small sip, and the heat slid down her throat like a fragile promise that the worst was over, at least for now. Adrian sat across from her, elbows resting lightly on his knees, posture relaxed but gaze sharply attentive. He wasn't demanding or impatient. He simply waited, giving her the room to speak when she was ready. In the quiet of the penthouse, with the soft glow of the fireplace behind him, he seemed less like the commanding stranger who had appeared out of the storm, and more like someone who understood what it meant to be alone. Clara inhaled shakily. "My wallet was stolen, my phone died, and Dylan was supposed to pick me up from the station." She swallowed hard. He never came. Adrian's jaw tightened, a flicker of indignation flashing across his features. "How long did you wait?" Clara ducked her head. "Hours." He let out a low, controlled exhale, the kind that carried an undercurrent of anger he didn't want to unleash in front of her. A man who leaves his partner freezing on Christmas Eve is not a man worth tears. Clara gave a humorless laugh, staring into the mug. "I guess I already knew that. Hearing it from someone else just makes it real." Adrian didn't interrupt. His eyes stayed on her, steady, unwavering. She could feel them like a hand on her shoulder even though he hadn't moved. "My grandmother's the only family I have left," Clara continued. "She's in the hospital, recovering from a stroke. I went to visit her in Millbrook today. She wanted me to come back to the city and spend Christmas with someone who cared about me." Clara shook her head, a bitter ache forming in her chest. "I didn't have the heart to tell her that no one really cared, that Dylan and I were already falling apart." Adrian leaned back slightly, the tension in his jaw softening into something more thoughtful. "Your grandmother sounds like someone who cares deeply for you." "She does. She always has." Clara blinked away the sting behind her eyes. "I just didn't want her to worry, or feel like she'd failed me somehow." Adrian's voice dropped, softer than she'd heard it before. "You were abandoned tonight, Clara, but not because you aren't worth showing up for. Some people simply don't know how to value what's in front of them." Clara looked up. Their eyes met. Something in his gray gaze was achingly sincere, almost unbearably so. She found herself unable to look away. "Why did you stop?" she asked in a whisper. "So many people walked past. You didn't have to." Adrian held her gaze, unflinching. Because the second I saw you, I knew something was wrong, and because leaving you there was not an option. Not then, not now. A tremor ran through her, but it wasn't from the cold this time. It was something deeper, something unsteady and new. Clara glanced around the penthouse, the glowing windows, the elegant decor. Who are you really? Adrian hesitated, as though choosing his words carefully. My name is Adrian Blackwell. I own Blackwell Systems, a few businesses in tech and medtech, but tonight none of that matters. What matters is that you're safe. Safe. She mouthed the word silently, as if testing how it felt. The fire crackled softly between them. Outside, the snow fell in gentle, hypnotic sheets. Inside, Clara felt her heartbeat slowing, an anchor settling after drifting in a storm. When she finally found her voice again, it came out fragile but certain. Thank you, Adrian, for being there. He gave her a small, quiet smile. I told you, I'll keep you safe. And sitting there in the penthouse, wrapped in warmth after nearly freezing to death, Clara almost believed him. Clara woke slowly, as though rising from the bottom of a deep, quiet lake. The sheets beneath her were impossibly soft, warmer than anything she remembered owning. For a moment she lay still, staring at the ceiling, unsure of where she was. Then the memory returned in vivid pieces. The snow, the freezing dark, Adrian's coat wrapped around her, the penthouse, the warmth. Her breath caught. She pushed herself upright, blinking at the spacious guest room. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating the skyline outside in gold. It was morning, a new one, and she was alive. A soft knock sounded. Clara tensed. May I come in? Adrian's voice was low, polite, strangely careful. Yes, she managed. The door opened and Adrian entered carrying a tray. Coffee, toast, sliced fruit, scrambled eggs. The scent drifted across the room, warm and comforting. He set the tray gently on the bed and stepped back as though giving her space mattered more than anything. Good morning, he said. You slept for almost 12 hours. Clara pulled the blankets closer. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for surviving, Adrian replied. His tone was steady, but there was a softness threaded through it. How are you feeling? Clara considered the question. Better, embarrassed, a little overwhelmed. All reasonable, Adrian said, as he took a seat in a chair near the window. His eyes searched her face with that same quietly attentive intensity. If I had found you even 10 minutes later, things might have been very different. Clara swallowed. The gratitude lodged in her throat. She picked up the coffee cup to avoid staring directly at him. The warmth seeped into her palms. She took a slow sip and felt her heartbeat settle. Adrian leaned forward slightly. I have something of yours. He reached over to the bedside table where her phone lay connected to a charger. It was fully powered now. Clara stared at it with a mix of dread and curiosity. When she unlocked it, the screen filled with missed calls and messages from Dylan. 17 missed calls. 23 messages. She opened the most recent one. The words hit her like a slap. Where are you? I came this morning. This is ridiculous. Call me. Now. Clara's fingers tightened around the phone until her knuckles ached. Her stomach twisted with a sharp, painful clarity. He went this morning, she whispered. 12 hours late. Adrian stayed silent, watching her closely, waiting. Clara scrolled through the earlier messages. None showed worry, none showed regret. They showed annoyance, impatience, self-interest. Her throat tightened. She dialed Dylan's number before she could second-guess herself. He answered immediately. Finally. Whose phone is that? Where were you last night? Clara steadied her voice. You didn't come. You left me there. A sigh crackled through the speaker. Babe, something came up. The guys wanted to hit the bar. I figured you'd get an Uber. Clara closed her eyes. My wallet was stolen. I froze for hours. You didn't even check on me. How was I supposed to know? You're always so independent. Don't guilt-trip me. It's Christmas. A quiet storm rose inside her. In the chair, Adrian's expression darkened. Not possessive, protective. We're done, Clara said plainly. Don't call me again. Dylan sputtered something, but she ended the call. Silence filled the room. Adrian stood slowly and approached the bed. He didn't touch her. He just met her gaze. "Are you all right?" Clara lifted her chin, feeling something in her chest shift, strengthen, settle. "I think I will be." Adrian's answering smile was small but brilliant, as though the light caught him in a way it hadn't before. "Good," he said softly, "because I made breakfast, and I'd like you to share it with me." Clara looked at the tray, then at him, and for the first time since yesterday's storm, she felt something warm bloom in the space where cold had lived. Possibility. Clara followed Adrian into the penthouse's kitchen, a sleek expanse of marble and stainless steel that looked more like a magazine spread than a place where real meals were made. Yet the aroma of warm butter, toasted bread, and fresh coffee made it undeniably real this morning. Despite the elegance of the room, there was something surprisingly quiet about it, as if Adrian had designed the space to be a refuge rather than a gallery. He pulled out a stool for her at the kitchen island. She hesitated, unused to anyone anticipating her needs, but then she sat. Adrian moved with the same calm efficiency she had seen the night before, plating food, pouring water, checking that the temperature of the coffee was exactly right. When he finally sat across from her, the city unfurled behind him through the tall windows, glowing with pale winter light. "Eat," he said gently. Clara took a cautious bite of toast. It tasted better than anything she had eaten in days. "Real food always does after fear," her grandmother used to say. She felt the memory settle over her, warm and familiar. Adrian watched her for a moment before speaking. "You mentioned your grandmother last night. Has she been ill long?" Clara sipped her coffee, grounding herself. "The stroke happened 3 weeks ago. She's been recovering well, but the doctors say stress could cause another. I've been visiting every day." She paused. "She's all I have left." Adrian nodded slowly, as though absorbing every detail with deliberate care.
"And your parents?"
She pressed her fingers against the mug. The answer was simple, but not easy.
"Gone. Car accident when I was 14.
Adrian's expression softened.
I'm sorry."
Clara inhaled carefully.
"I learned early that life doesn't pause for grief. You adjust or you break."
Adrian held her gaze, his voice low. "That's not something a child should have had to learn alone." She looked away, staring out the window. Snow dusted the city like powdered glass.
"I had my grandmother. She raised me. She taught me to be strong, to be kind, to survive.
Clara's voice weakened.
I don't know what I'd do if I lost her too."
She expected Adrian to offer some empty reassurance, something polite and distant. Instead, he said something that startled her with its sincerity.
"You won't lose her. Not while she still has someone to fight her way back to."
Clara blinked, caught off guard. The words hit her with unexpected force. It was strange how someone who had known her less than a day could speak to the deepest parts of her without stumbling. Adrian looked down at his coffee before continuing. "I understand more than you think." Clara glanced at him. The shift in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. He was opening a door to something personal, something private. "I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside," he said quietly. Wealth, influence, a family people respected. But inside those walls there was very little warmth. Success mattered more than people. Image mattered more than truth. He tapped a thumb lightly against the rim of his cup. "I learned early that isolation can exist even in a crowded room." Clara studied him. The understatement in his words hinted at something darker, but he didn't elaborate. She didn't push, she simply listened. Adrian met her eyes again. "When I saw you last night, alone in the snow, something in me recognized that look, that quiet desperation. I couldn't walk away." His voice was steady, but there was an echo of something raw beneath it. Clara felt her breath hitch. She hadn't realized he carried ghosts too. She finished a piece of fruit, then set her fork down. "Thank you for telling me. You didn't have to." Adrian's lips curved slightly. "Maybe not, but I wanted to. You deserve honesty, and safety, and more than what you've been given." The words wrapped around her like another layer of warmth. Clara felt it again, that quiet shift inside her. Like a door opening, like something thawing. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed sharply on the counter. She jumped. Adrian's face sharpened instantly. "Is it him?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "No, it's the hospital." Her stomach clenched. She swiped to answer. "Hello, this is Clara. Miss Hart, the nurse said, your grandmother woke up early this morning asking for you. She's stable, alert, and she seems much stronger today." Relief flooded Clara so fast, she nearly dropped the phone. "Thank you. I'll be there soon." She hung up and exhaled shakily. Adrian stood. "Do you want me to drive you?" She hesitated, but only for a second. "Yes, please." Adrian reached for his coat, his movements purposeful, protective, unspoken promise in every step. And as Clara followed him toward the elevator, she realized something quietly unshakable. Last night, he saved her life. This morning, he was becoming part of it. The drive to Millbrook General was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt intentional rather than empty. Snow still drifted from the sky in soft spirals, but the storm had passed, leaving the world wrapped in a fragile, glass-like calm. Adrian drove with a steadiness that matched the morning light, his hands relaxed on the wheel, his eyes flicking toward Clara every so often as if to confirm she was still warm, still safe, still breathing beside him. Clara kept her gaze on the window. The anxiety tightening her chest was old, familiar, born from too many hospital corridors and too many nights spent watching machines breathe for the only family she had left. But beneath the worry was something else, gratitude, because she was not arriving alone this time. She had not woken alone. She had not survived the night alone. When they pulled into the parking lot, Clara's pulse quickened. Adrian put the car in park and turned toward her. "You don't have to rush," he said quietly. "Take your time." She nodded, inhaling slowly until her heartbeat steadied enough to move. Inside the hospital, the fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead. The scent of antiseptic and faint citrus cleaner filled the air. Clara felt her shoulders tense with instinctive memory, but then she felt Adrian's presence beside her, grounded and solid without ever intruding. He did not hold her hand. He did not guide her steps. He was simply there, an anchor she hadn't known she needed. They reached her grandmother's room. Clara paused at the door, exhaling once, twice, then pushed it open. Eleanor Hart lay propped on pillows, her white hair brushed neatly, her eyes bright and alert in a way Clara hadn't seen in months. The moment she saw Clara, her lips curved into a soft, unmistakable smile. "There you are, sweetheart." Clara rushed to her side, emotion tightening her throat. "Gran, oh thank God." Eleanor reached out a thin hand, and Clara immediately covered it with both of hers. "I told you I would not leave this world without seeing you properly settled," her grandmother whispered with a spark of humor beneath her frail voice. Clara let out a shaky laugh. "You scared me, again." "Life keeps things interesting," Eleanor replied with a gentle wink. It was only then that Clara realized Adrian had stopped at the doorway, giving them space. Eleanor noticed him too, her eyes sharpened with interest. "And who is this handsome young man?" she asked, her voice warm, inquisitive, unmistakably alive. Clara flushed. "This is Adrian Blackwell. He helped me last night. I wouldn't be here without him." Adrian stepped forward politely. "It's very good to meet you, Mrs. Hart." Eleanor studied him for a beat longer than necessary, her gaze perceptive in a way only grandmothers possessed. "Thank you for bringing my girl home safely," she said with quiet sincerity. Not just anyone would have done the same. Adrian dipped his head slightly. "I'm grateful I found her when I did." Clara's heart stuttered. Something about the simplicity of those words hit her deeper than she expected. Eleanor's lips twitched. "Sit, both of you." Clara pulled a chair close. Adrian dragged another beside it, though he kept a respectful distance. Eleanor's gaze bounced between them with a knowing glimmer that Clara recognized all too well. "Tell me what happened last night," Eleanor insisted. Clara hesitated, glancing at Adrian. He nodded once, as if giving her permission to share whatever she needed. So Clara told her. The cold, the snow, Dylan's absence, the fear, and Adrian. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her expression shifting only when Clara described how long she had waited at the station. "That boy never deserved you," Eleanor said firmly. "But I like this one." "Gran," Clara hissed, mortified. Adrian coughed lightly, clearly holding back a smile. Eleanor leaned closer to Clara. "Life brings the right people at the right time, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. You nearly froze alone last night, but instead you were found by someone who didn't hesitate. That means something." Clara opened her mouth to deflect, to deny, to protect herself from the weight of her grandmother's words. But nothing came out. Because maybe Eleanor was right. As Clara looked at Adrian across the sterile hospital room, the morning sun casting warm gold across his shoulders, she felt a quiet truth settling beneath her ribs. Something had begun the moment he reached for her hand in the snow, and it wasn't finished, not even close. The visit stretched longer than Clara anticipated, warmed by familiar laughter, soft reminiscence, and the quiet relief of seeing Eleanor stronger than she had been in weeks. Adrian remained by her side through it all, steady and unobtrusive, offering water when her voice broke, adjusting Eleanor's blanket when a chill slipped through the air, handling every small detail with effortless consideration. It wasn't the behavior of a man trying to impress, it was instinct, woven into him with a sincerity that made Clara's heart shift in ways she wasn't prepared for. When Eleanor's eyelids grew heavy, Clara gently brushed a hand over her grandmother's wrist. "Rest now, Gran. I'll come back tomorrow." Eleanor squeezed her hand lightly, then fixed her gaze on Adrian. "Take care of her, young man." "Always," Adrian replied, surprising both himself and Clara with the quiet certainty of the word. Clara's breath caught, but before she could respond, her grandmother had drifted into a peaceful sleep. Clara and Adrian stepped into the hallway. The sterile lights buzzed faintly above them, and the floor reflected the early afternoon glow spilling through the tall windows at the end of the corridor. Clara felt the residual tension from the emotional morning beginning to settle in her shoulders. "Thank you for coming with me," she said softly, her voice carrying both gratitude and exhaustion. Adrian's expression gentled. "You shouldn't have had to face that alone." His sincerity was disarming, the kind that made deflection impossible. They walked toward the exit slowly, as though neither wanted to break the fragile quiet between them. Outside, the sun was beginning its slow descent, turning the snow-covered parking lot into a field of tiny glittering mirrors. Clara wrapped her coat tighter around herself, though the air was gentler than last night's bitter freeze. Adrian opened the car door for her and waited until she settled into the seat before closing it. When he slid behind the wheel, he didn't start the engine immediately. He rested his hands on the steering wheel and looked at her with an intent she couldn't decipher. "What are you doing for Christmas Eve dinner?" he asked, voice low, controlled. Clara blinked, caught off guard. "I haven't thought that far. I was supposed to go with Dylan, but she let the rest trail off." The fracture in her voice said everything. Adrian watched her for a moment, something shifting in his expression, too subtle and too deep to name. "Come to my place tonight. I'm cooking dinner. It's nothing formal, just good food and quiet company." Clara stared at him, shock, hesitation, warmth. A strange fluttering sensation she had not felt in years. "You don't have to do that. I know, but I want to." His voice softened, losing its usual polished edge. "Last night could have ended differently. I would like tonight to be better for you, warmer." The sincerity in his tone left no room for misinterpretation. It wasn't pity, it wasn't obligation, it was an invitation, an open door. Clara exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the window. "I don't want to intrude." Adrian shook his head. "You won't. The truth is, I've spent every Christmas Eve alone since my parents passed. Work, silence, routine. You would be doing me a favor by breaking that pattern." His confession surprised her. A quiet ache bloomed beneath her ribs. She turned toward him fully now, studying the angles of his face, the steadiness in his gaze. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a man offering warmth after pulling her from the cold. "All right," she said finally, her voice soft but certain. "I'll come." Something in Adrian's expression flickered. Relief, gratitude, something softer and unnamed. "Good. Dinner at 7, And Clara. He paused, his voice lowering further. You don't need to bring anything, just yourself. Her chest tightened in a way she couldn't explain. The car started, the engine humming like a gentle promise. As they pulled away from the hospital, Clara glanced out the window at the glowing city and realized something she hadn't dared to admit. The storm last night had ended more than just a dangerous journey. It had begun something else, something unexpected, something warm, something she was no longer sure she wanted to resist. Clara stood outside Adrian's penthouse door for a long moment, smoothing the sleeves of her borrowed coat and steadying her breath. The hallway was quiet, illuminated by soft golden sconces reflecting across glossy marble floors. She felt strangely suspended between worlds, the one she had lived in for years and the one she had stumbled into last night, a world built of warmth and unexpected safety. Before she could second-guess herself, the door opened. Adrian stood framed in the doorway, dressed in a dark sweater that made his gray eyes even sharper. His expression shifted the moment he saw her, a softness carving itself into features usually controlled and composed. "You're right on time," he said gently, before stepping aside. "Come in." Clara entered, and the scent hit her first. Rosemary, garlic, something rich simmering on the stove. A warmth that wasn't just temperature but atmosphere. The penthouse glowed under dimmed lights and the crackling fireplace, transforming the sleek modern space into something intimate and lived in. Adrian watched her as she took it in. "I hope you're hungry. I haven't cooked for anyone in years." She lifted a brow in mild surprise. "You cook?" He gave a small shrug. "There, when I was younger, it was one of the only ways to find peace in a very noisy house." Clara followed him into the kitchen, where a beautifully set table waited near the windows. Snow drifted softly across the skyline outside, but here inside everything was warm gold and gentle shadows. Adrian moved with calm purpose, pouring wine, adjusting the candles, checking the oven. She sensed he was more nervous than he appeared. "Can I help with anything?" she asked. He glanced over his shoulder, lips curving faintly. "You already are." She felt her cheeks warm and hoped the low lighting hit it. Dinner began quietly. Adrian plated roasted chicken, herb potatoes, and winter vegetables with a precision that would have impressed a professional chef. Clara took her first bite and closed her eyes involuntarily. "This is incredible." Relief flickered across Adrian's face. "I'm glad. I wasn't sure I remembered the recipe." They ate slowly, the ease between them growing with each exchanged glance. Clara found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the evening, into the gentle cadence of Adrian's voice as he shared pieces of his life he rarely spoke about. "My father believed that emotions were a liability," Adrian said quietly, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "He valued control above all else, reputation, power, but not connection." Clara listened, absorbing each word with care. "What about your mother?" A pause. His gaze dipped. "She tried. She really did. But loving someone who refuses to love back can drain the life from you. She died when I was 19. Something about the way he said it told Clara that grief never left him, simply settled deeper. "I'm sorry," she murmured. He nodded once, accepting the sympathy without flinching from it. "And you, Clara, what do you want now that you've left Dylan behind?" Clara stared out the window, watching the snow fall in slow spirals. "I want a life that feels like mine, not borrowed, not tolerated. I want warmth, safety, someone who shows up." Adrian's hand tightened slightly around his glass, something fierce and unspoken flickering in his eyes. "You deserve all of that, and more." The words settled over her like a blanket. She hadn't expected this evening to feel so profound, so quietly transformative. She glanced back at him. "Why did you invite me tonight, Adrian?" He held her gaze without hesitation. "Because the moment I found you in the snow, I knew two things. That you needed help, and that if I walked away, I would regret it for the rest of my life." Clara's breath stilled. The room felt smaller, warmer, closer. Adrian leaned slightly forward, his voice dropping. "And tonight, I wanted to give you something different from the cold you've known, Something better. Her pulse fluttered. And what is that? His answer was soft but unwavering. A place where you are wanted. For a moment, time suspended, the snow outside falling like slow confetti across the glowing city. Clara felt the truth of his words settle deep inside her, a warmth she hadn't known she was starving for. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone at all. The evening unfolded with surprising ease, each moment layering warmth over the lingering cold that had lived inside Clara for far too long. After dinner, Adrian guided her to the living room, where the fireplace cast slow-moving gold across the room. They spoke in quiet tones, laughter slipping between them like soft threads weaving something unmistakably intimate. Clara settled into the plush sofa, legs tucked beneath her as Adrian handed her a blanket and sat nearby. Not too close, not far enough to break the fragile gravity between them. She noticed small details about him now, the way he listened with full attention, the calm discipline in his posture, the rare curve of a smile he didn't seem to give freely. But underneath that calm, she sensed something else. Tension, subtle but present, like a string drawn too tightly. "What is it?" she asked quietly. "You seem distracted." Adrian hesitated, fingers steepling beneath his chin. "There's something I didn't say earlier, something about last night." Clara's breath stilled. "What do you mean?" He looked at her with a seriousness she hadn't seen before. "When I found you, I wasn't the only one who noticed you were alone." A cold ripple slid down Clara's arms. Someone else was there? Adrian nodded once. A man, mid-30s, wearing a dark hooded jacket. He was standing across the street, half hidden behind a pillar, watching you. Clara's pulse quickened, dread churning in her stomach. Adrian's voice remained calm but firm. "When I approached you, he stepped back. When I carried you to the car, he disappeared." "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" she whispered. "Because you were barely conscious, and this morning at the hospital was not the moment to frighten you. But tonight, you deserve the truth." Clara gripped the blanket tightly. "Was it Dylan?" Adrian shook his head. "No, I checked. Dylan was at a bar across town until after midnight. His phone records confirm it." Clara blinked. "You checked?" Adrian exhaled. Not defensively, simply honest. "I needed to be sure there wasn't an immediate threat. You were vulnerable. I wasn't going to risk your safety." A mixture of fear and gratitude tightened Clara's chest. "Do you think he meant to hurt me?" "I don't know. But there was intention in the way he watched you, and something about his posture wasn't right. Predatory." The word sent another shiver down her spine. Clara swallowed. "Why would someone follow me?" Adrian studied her carefully. "Has anything strange happened recently? Unusual calls? Someone watching the cafe where you work? Anyone from your past who resurfaced?" She tried to think. Number. Nothing. Just Dylan. And even he never. Her phone buzzed suddenly from the coffee table. Both of them flinched. Clara leaned forward, her chest tight. When she turned the screen over, her blood went cold. Unknown number. A single text. "You shouldn't have left the station." Clara's breath hitched. Her hands trembled as she handed the phone to Adrian. He read the message, his expression turning sharp, controlled, dangerous. "This is him," he said quietly. "He followed you. Maybe from the train, maybe before." Fear crashed through her like an icy wave. Adrian moved closer, taking the phone and placing it face down on the table. His voice softened but lost none of its resolve. "Clara, you're safe here. No one can get into this building without passing 2 security desks, biometric access, and monitored elevators. No one can reach this floor without my clearance." She nodded, but fear still trembled beneath her ribs. Adrian reached out, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "I promise you this. Whoever that man is, he will not get near you again. I'll make sure of it." Clara met his gaze, and the certainty in it steadied something inside her. Outside the windows, snow continued to fall softly, but the warmth in the room grew stronger, a barrier between her and the shadows. She exhaled slowly, letting the fear settle into something quieter. "Thank you, Adrian," she whispered, "for everything." He held her gaze for a long moment, his voice low, steady, unyielding. "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time since the text arrived, Clara believed him. The snow deepened outside the penthouse windows as the night grew heavier, pressing quietly against the glass like a blanket of white fog. Inside, however, the air was warm and charged with something unspoken. Clara sat very still on the sofa, her pulse thudding unevenly in her throat as she tried to process the message, the stranger, the fear crawling along her skin like a cold fingerprint. Adrian paced once across the living room, the firelight casting sharp lines across his jaw. He wasn't flustered. He wasn't panicked. He was calculating. Watching him, Clara realized this was a man accustomed to solving crises, not shrinking from them. But there was something else in his movements too, a tightly contained anger, the kind that came only when someone he cared about was threatened. He stopped pacing. "I'm calling the building security team up here. They need to review last night's footage again." Clara inhaled sharply. "You think he followed me here?" Adrian shook his head. "No, he wouldn't have gotten past the lobby, but I want to know if he tried." He walked toward the kitchen, phone already in hand, but paused when he heard the tremor Clara couldn't hide in her breathing. Instead of making the call immediately, he set the phone down and returned to her side, sitting close enough to offer warmth but far enough to give her space. Clara looked up at him, eyes wide, vulnerable. "Why is this happening?" Adrian's expression softened. "You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes danger doesn't come from mistakes. Sometimes it comes from being seen by the wrong person." The words chilled her, but his calm steadied her. "Tell me everything that happened yesterday," Adrian said gently. "Every detail, even if it doesn't feel important." Clara tucked her knees closer to her chest. "I left Millbrook around 7. The train was crowded at first, then almost empty by the time we reached the city. I didn't talk to anyone. No one sat near me. No one bumped into me." She paused. "My wallet was gone before I reached the station, so maybe someone took it earlier. But I didn't feel anything." Adrian nodded slowly. "Pickpockets work fast, but they don't usually linger to watch their victims. This is something else." She shivered. "Are you sure I'm safe here?" "Absolutely." His answer came immediately. "My security infrastructure is designed for threats far more sophisticated than one man hiding in a train station." Clara breathed out, only slightly relieved. She studied Adrian's profile, the intensity in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "You seem like you've dealt with things like this before." He hesitated, gaze flicking briefly toward the fire. "My family name comes with attention, not all of it the kind you want. There were stalkers, extortion attempts, people trying to gain access for money or influence. I learned early how to build layers of protection." Clara's brows knitted. That must have been terrifying. Sometimes, Adrian admitted. But fear is manageable when you have control, when you have resources. He shifted, turning fully toward her. "And right now, you have me." The words washed over her like warmth she didn't know she needed. Before she could respond, a soft chime sounded from the penthouse security panel near the hallway. Adrian stood immediately. "That's the team. Stay here." Clara nodded, watching him disappear down the hallway. Moments later, she heard low murmurs, Adrian issuing orders, asking for footage timestamps, requesting access logs. His voice was steady but cold, edged with a lethal precision she hadn't heard before. It made her feel safer than she wanted to admit. She wandered toward the window, hugging herself as she stared out at the snow-covered city. Everything felt unreal. Just last night, she had nearly died alone in the cold. Now she was standing in a penthouse, watching a man she barely knew move mountains to protect her. A reflection flickered in the glass. Clara froze. A face, behind her, in the hallway. She turned sharply, heart pounding, but it was only Adrian returning from the foyer. Relief hit her so fast her knees wavered. Adrian noticed instantly, crossing the room in 3 long strides. "Clara, what is it?" "Nothing. She shook her head, breath unsteady. "I thought I saw someone behind me." Adrian's hands hovered near her arms, not touching, but ready. "You're safe. No one is here but us. The security feed shows no intrusions. She nodded, though her pulse refused to calm. Adrian's voice lowered. Clara, look at me. She lifted her eyes to his. You are not imagining things. Trauma makes shadows move. Fear fills rooms that should be empty. It doesn't mean you're losing control. It means you survived something you shouldn't have endured alone. The truth in his tone anchored her. She swallowed, then whispered, I don't want to be alone tonight. Adrian exhaled, something gentle and fierce passing through his expression. You won't be. He guided her back to the sofa, staying close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him. Outside, the snow fell thicker, and somewhere in the night, the city seemed to hold its breath. Inside the penthouse, Clara felt the fear inside her shift, slowly, tentatively, into something else. Trust. Clara didn't remember drifting off. One moment she was sitting beside Adrian on the sofa, wrapped in warmth and quiet reassurance, watching the fire melt into embers. The next, she woke to the soft glow of morning spilling gently across the penthouse. Her head rested on Adrian's shoulder, their hands loosely intertwined between them, as if her body had made the decision long before her mind caught up. For a few breaths she stayed perfectly still, listening to the steady rhythm of Adrian's breathing, the quiet hum of the city below, and the faint whisper of snowfall outside. The world felt suspended, wrapped in a serene silence she hadn't known in years. Adrian stirred slightly, his fingers tightening imperceptibly around hers. You're awake, he murmured, his voice low and warm from sleep. Clara lifted her head slowly. Was I? Leaning on you this whole time? Adrian's lips curved in a faint smile. Only since you fell asleep halfway through telling me your favorite holiday memory. Mortified, she covered her face with one hand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't apologize, he said gently. I liked being here with you. The words lingered between them like a soft current, warm and steady. Clara let her hand fall back into her lap, suddenly hyper-aware of how close they were, how easy it felt to be beside him. Outside, dawn unfolded across the skyline in shades of rose and gold, casting the room in a glow that felt almost unreal. Clara turned toward the windows, watching sunlight dance over the snow-covered rooftops. It felt like a different world entirely, a world where fear hadn't chased her through a freezing night, where she hadn't nearly collapsed alone, where someone had chosen to stay beside her until morning. Adrian rose quietly, offering her a hand. Come, I want to show you something. Still half wrapped in the blanket, she let him guide her toward the balcony. He unlocked the glass door, and a burst of crisp winter air filled the room, carrying with it the clean scent of snow. Adrian stepped out first, then held the door for her. Clara hesitated, then followed him onto the terrace. The city stretched out endlessly beneath them, blanketed in white, shimmering under the newborn sun. Smoke curled lazily from distant chimneys, and the faint sound of car engines stirred the quiet morning. Clara had lived in this city for years, but she had never seen it like this, still, untouched, breathtaking. Adrian stood beside her, his breath forming pale clouds in the cold air. This is my favorite moment of Christmas morning, he said softly, before the world wakes, when everything is quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. Clara hugged the blanket tighter around her shoulders. And what are your thoughts right now? Adrian took a long breath, his gaze fixed on the horizon. That I'm glad I stopped last night, that I'm glad you're here, and that whoever was watching you won't get another chance. Clara looked at him sharply. Did security find anything? No, but I'm having my team pull the street cameras surrounding the station. We'll know more soon. His voice carried the same calm certainty that had anchored her last night. You don't need to be afraid today. Clara nodded slowly, the reassurance settling deep within her chest. As they stood there together, morning unfolding in quiet brilliance, a small truth formed in her heart, a truth she wasn't ready to say aloud but couldn't deny. Adrian had become more than a rescuer in the snow, more than a stranger with a warm coat and steady hands. He had become a presence she trusted instinctively, an anchor she hadn't known she needed, a warmth she had forgotten she deserved. He turned toward her then, his voice softer than the morning light. "Clara, whatever happens next, you're not facing it alone." She met his gaze, feeling the words settle like a promise. "I know," she whispered. For the first time since the night everything fell apart, Clara felt the weight inside her chest lift, replaced by something fragile but powerful: hope. And as the Christmas sun rose higher, casting golden light over the world below, Clara realized that the storm that nearly ended everything had instead become the beginning of something entirely new.